Welcome to this fireside chat. Usually it's on Tuesdays, but we didn't want to interfere with any flames of romance on Valentine's Day that people may want to kindle either in breakfast or dinner time, which is around when we are having this chat. So by exception, it's on a Wednesday. And maybe it's a good day because quite a few people showing up, Kath. We should think about this. Welcome. My name is Pieter van der Graag. I am one of the directors of the foundation set up in the Netherlands to support the global ecosystem restoration camps movement. And today I will be your host for our fireside chat. The original thinking behind the fireside chat is an analogy of our name, camps. At the end of a hard-working day restoring ecosystems, we gather around the fire, we relax, we drink and eat together, and we start to get to know each other a bit better. We talk about our kids, we talk about our lives, we look at the stars. I know if you're just waking up, that might be a bit of a strange thing to do, but most of us are now about to enter evening. John is in Dubai. I think it's already dark where you are, John. And we chat and we listen and we hear what motivates us all and what brings us together. Today, and as usual, by the way, in these circles, there's a few people more talkative than the others. So some people start that conversation. Three of us start the conversation today, myself, John, you, and Chris Nash from one of the ERCs, this one in South Africa. And once we are done with what we have prepared, we welcome you to ask your questions, become part of the fireside chat. Remember, it's supposed to be a relaxed moment where we get to know each other. We can ask each other questions and we can have some philosophical discussions if we wish, or dig a bit deeper into things that are happening within ecosystem restoration around the world. I'm going to share my screen because I have a PowerPoint that I'm going to base my little introduction on, and then we'll go to Chris and John. I hope everyone can see what my screen has to offer. Not sure if it's on full screen for you.
It is.
Good, thank you, Mark. Welcome, as I said, with John and Chris. If you have questions, please hold them until after Chris's presentation. You can put them in the chat and the team will, there's a few people from the team here, we'll gather them and we'll make sure that they're answered, but we'll first go through all the presentations and make sure that everything is said that people want to say. You can do them through the chat, but you can also do them in person. Raise your hand and I will definitely give you the floor. There is this little icon thingy that you can press on and it has raise your hand in it, and I'll see you raising your hand and I'll give you the floor. The session is formally planned for an hour, but we've been doing this for a few years now, and we noticed that quite a few people like to stick around, talk a little bit more, sometimes for another hour, and that's all possible. We keep the Zoom open. Some of us will stay and be part of the conversation. As I said, it's all about getting to know each other and having a relaxed conversation about the work that's taking place around the world around restoration. I start with some news and some experience you can join into. We're sitting here around the fire, but all behind our computers virtually. It's much nicer to sit together around the fire and talk about things that are happening. And there's a few opportunities in the next few weeks, next few months that you could sign up to and meet all those people who are immersed in ecosystem restoration around the world, share your thoughts, build up your own knowledge, make new friends. In Spain, in Murcia, at ERC Altiplano, which is the first ecosystem restoration camp ever established, you can sign up to participate in tree planting until May. You sign up through our website, you get in touch with the camp and they'll let you know how and when you could come. There is a planned activity on the 18th of March, which is an open day at the regenerative farm. It's a one-day event. You can learn more about what Alfonso and Sylvia are doing with regeneration in that quite dry, eroded place in Spain. In California, tomorrow there is a webinar on water and fire. It's organized by the Campfire Restoration Project, formerly the third camp to ever join the movement. They're organizing that webinar on water and fire, and there's a webinar on green building with experts presenting building techniques with cob, straw bale, and other materials, and that's on the 10th of March. Then Habiba in Egypt is organizing May 6th through 16th their summer school. It's a 1 or 2 week. You can choose if you will go for 1 week or if you will go for 2 weeks. Deep dive into regeneration in quite dry and desertified land around the world. And the sound I just heard reminded me to ask you to please mute your microphone, so that we can all be less distracted during the presentations. Habiba has given us a little video that I'd like to share. And if that doesn't persuade you to go, you need to check your motivations. Here we go. I hope everyone can see it. Kath, you will confirm? Yes.
What a wonderful feeling. Do you feel it? Not yet. Bib Organic Farm, a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful summer camp.
You want to be part of the summer camp?
Apply now.
HabibaCommunity.com.
Join us. We're waiting for you. Woo!
And I don't know of many restoration locations where you can work during the day and then swim in the Gulf of Aqaba in the morning and the evening, and it really looks like what you just saw. It's a former beach resort. A very pleasant place to be, and also very inspirational because 30 millimeters of rain, desert conditions, and still there's progress on restoration and regeneration. If you don't want to travel to Egypt, in England, you can join the Introduction to Rewilding experience a couple of days in March, 21st through 23rd of March at the ERC Ambercombe there. And the other event that's being organized in the short term, 7 to 10 of April, is the Reforest Fest organized by the Camp Green Pop, which is a restoration celebration that brings people together to plant thousands of trees while enjoying a celebration like no other. And it too has a video that I've seen, and that should be persuasive.
Here is a thing with nothing to say. Mountains won't stand in your way. You like to walk as if troubles are behind you. They'll never find you as long as you hide. Oh, you miss the rain, standing with forehead on window pane. Come, oh, bring us your shame. We won't let you flounder, we'll call you by name. You with the sun dripping over your face, nobody knows where you've been. Your arms open wide, greeting strangers like family. Nobody knows all the places you've sinned. La 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 la. wanted to say. Darkness won't stand in your way. You hold me now as if nothing would ever break all that flowers here in your heart. There I go again, bleeding and beating on window pane, crying. Oh, here is my shame. Don't leave me here lonely. I've called you by name.
Let's not start that again.
Here is
I think what these videos show and what we know in each of these camp experiences, giving humanity a future on this planet is actually a lot of fun. So see if you can join these experiences if you live near or if you're willing to travel. Those people concerned about CO2 emissions, you will compensate your trip within your first day with everything you plant in the soils. So it should be fine. Finally, there are also, next to this experience, which are sort of organized events, there are also some longer term volunteering opportunities at each camp. You can go to the website and look for the Work With Us page, where you will see more information on each of these activities. The Ecosystem Restoration Foundation is looking for an assistant in fundraising. We have a great fundraising team, but we're also looking for volunteers to help us find out all the opportunities that are out there that we could apply to on behalf of the projects. There's longer-term volunteering opportunities at Camp Altiplano, very much associated with the tree planting exercise, but also with some impact measurement. Vier Soleil, I saw Terrell is in the call, is looking for volunteers with about a 2-week stay, but also looking for trainee and apprentices for 2 to 6 months at that wonderful location in France. Habiba, next to the event, the summer school, they are looking for research volunteers, people who are willing to do some measurements, some testing, some science at the locations with the Bedouin farmers that they're working. Camp Pacheland in Belgium is looking for some long-term volunteers, and Camp Maba Adama in Portugal is also looking for a volunteer. And all these volunteer positions are further advertised on our website, where you will find more information and where you can be brought into touch with these locations that are looking for help. And then very finally, before we get to John and Chris, it's a bit mysterious what we're saying here, but on the 29th of March, we have some great plans. So keep your eye to this space, our website, our social media. And on the 29th of March, we will throw some announcements in there that hopefully will excite you. And for those who are actually, because I know some of you are coordinators or actually leaders or change makers at the Restoration Initiatives, part of the ERC movement, you will get an invite for an event amongst ourselves where we will share what we have done. That's it for me. I will point you to our fundraising part because it's important. It's an economic crisis. There's a war on. There might be more happening soon. Please, all these projects need contributions. So if you have friends that aren't donating yet, see if you can persuade them to go to our website and make that step. Thank you for listening to me. You may have come not to listen to me, but you wanted to listen to John and to Chris. So John, you seem to have disappeared from my screen. Oh, there you are. All the way in Dubai now. John, I give you the opening salvo.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. I hope you can hear me well. Yes, I'm here in Dubai. I've been invited to the World Government Summit, and you'll be happy to know that they're talking about participation and collaboration and about how to have sustainable futures that include functional ecosystems and that are peaceful and joyous.
Honey?
Hopefully they're not. Hopefully they're not only talking about it. How did I get muted? Can you hear me? Okay. So I've been focused on 3 camps. I visited Clifford Smith in Kentucky at Appalachian Renewal. This is a very exciting camp. It has 7,000 acres and it's working on mountaintop removal, and it has tremendous potential. It's also extremely difficult and challenging, but really has great potential. And then we've been talking a lot with Somalia and with India. And all 3 of these camps, I think, are terrific candidates for social infrastructure, for central kitchens, creator spaces, and cultural stages. So a lot of the things that you're seeing at the other camps could be institutionalized and be there in community consistently. And in these places, it's also possible to think about full employment and food security through what we're doing. And here at the World Government Summit, these are real serious questions, and there is the possibility for funding for this. And the concept of public-private partnership that led by the people instead of led by the governments is something which I think we need to think about, because it's possible to go faster. It's possible to choose to do this. And by taking on the biggest problems, we're actually leading and have a voice then at the table. I also noticed that we, to get here, I flew over Turkey and Syria. And so the situation is quite extreme. And then I also noticed that in the camps, there's this desire. I keep hearing somebody in there, but anyway, what I noticed in the camps is that there's this desire for greater efficiency and effectiveness. And I think this is a really good sign. And one of the things that I've been thinking about and discussing with one of our partners in South Africa, Just Trees, Carl Pretorius, is on our advisory council. And we've been talking about creating an apprenticeship program with Just Trees in order to have some people study the creation, really excellent creation of fully functional tree nurseries. And the 3 camps that I just mentioned, Kentucky and Somalia and India, the Camp Kati in Bihar, are perfect for this. So there may be other camps as well who are interested in this. So let's talk about it. If we can put this into a systematic curriculum with set times, maybe we could even have revolving programs. I think this would be very, very useful. And here also in Dubai, I've been finding some people who really need to support in a way. They're talking the talk, but they need to walk the walk. And we can invite them to join with the ecosystem restoration camps and communities movement. And then they get the opportunity to move from concept to action. And that would be very, very good for them and very, very good for the camps movement and for the earth. So that's really what I wanted to talk about mainly today. And we're going to hear a really great presentation from Chris now. So thank you so much for listening, and best of wishes. And I'll be around a little bit longer after for the conversation. Thanks.
You can see from John's introduction how important it is that we are a community together. John being able to participate at the level of world government is a great way to connect all these local initiatives to what's going on at the global scale with people who are trying to govern us. That local scale is Chris Nash from Pachamama in South Africa. I'm not going to say anything about your project because I know you will introduce us in full in our preparing conversations. It's quite inspiring what you're doing, also on a level on how to make the project financially sustainable, which I know is what many projects are struggling with. And you found some pathways there that are good to share. Chris, it's all yours.
Thank you, Peter. Can I just get a check if you can hear me? Is my sound coming through?
I can hear you.
Fantastic. So just before we get into my presentation, I think for my own purpose, but also just want to put an invitation out for us to just take a moment to tune in to and presence with ourselves. So maybe I could invite a deep breath together and a check-in with what is going on in your body and what you're feeling in this present moment. And also to take note of where you are at the moment, your orientation on this planet, the life that surrounds you, the ecosystems, this web of life from the microbes to fungi, to plants and animals and people, and how that's located within this continuum of deep time and evolutionary progress to this moment in time where we have the opportunity to connect in this way and to explore how we can best coordinate and collaborate to create conditions for life to thrive. And I think for me, that's at the heart of what's inspired me to research and experiment and spend the last 9 years of my life working practically in the fields of holistic land management, permaculture, and ecosystem restoration. And the last 4 of those years have been through a pilot project, ecosystem restoration project at Pachamama, Pachamama Forest Retreat in Knysna in the Western Cape. And with that, I'm going to switch over to my presentation and share my screen. And maybe I could just get an indication. Is that being visible? Is that full screen? Thank you, Andrew. Fantastic. So at Pachamama, we're very blessed to be located right next to the largest indigenous forest in Southern Africa, in the Knysna region, about 50,000 hectares of pristine native forest. This is about about 2 kilometers walk from the camp down into the national park to the Homtini River. And for me, this has been our great teacher, this forest where we can really observe nature. We can observe an intact ecosystem and draw inspiration and wisdom and learning on how to apply that insight into our systems and processes. So I'm going to start with some aspects of the challenge that we're facing, both on a global and a local level. And I think we're all aware in different capacities and have different perspectives on this meta crisis, converging social, ecological, economic, and cultural crises. Ecologically, ecosystem degradation, climate change, loss of biodiversity. And without going too much into it, I also want to bring particular attention to one economic concern particularly around energy blindness and how we've become accustomed to living in a world with abundant energy fueled by fossil fuels, and the reality that that's a finite resource. And so we have limits to energy and to materials. And so reimagining how we can sustain ourselves as humanity on Earth is within finite resources. Once this abundance of energy subsides is something that I'm thinking a lot about. That also poses a great opportunity to collaborate and co-create and build networks of solidarity through collective action, investing our time and resources towards the holistic restoration of both inner and outer landscapes, prototyping regenerative systems that work for all life and for generations to come. And what better common ground can we find than literally the ground beneath our feet? So this is giving some indication of where we're located, where we've been working from, and right in the heart of the garden route between George and Plettenberg Bay. And this is part of the Greater Western Cape fynbos biome, which happens to be an incredibly biodiverse biome. In fact, the most plant diversity per square meter on the planet. To give you an idea, we have about 12,500 species of plant in a very small geographical area, and that's more than the entire Northern Hemisphere. Just on Cable Mountain and the Cape Peninsula, about 2,500 species of plant, which is more than the entire UK. So there's an incredible ecological heritage in this region that I feel very passionate to serve and to play my part in conserving and restoring. And so some bioregional context, as I've already been shared. One of the main challenges that we face is catastrophic fire. I'll get more into detail why that is, but also other climate associated risks like fire, drought, and flood conditions. We are very fortunate that we have rainfall throughout the year. And in the region, the main sectors are commercial forestry for timber, as well as tourism and dairy farming. Another interesting context is that the large-scale forestry sector is at the moment withdrawing from the region. Their viability studies showed they'd be viable until 2020, and 2020 came along. And the first phase of returning 50,000 hectares of commercial pine plantation back to government was initiated. And the response to that has been to heavily subsidize the sector out of concerns for impact on local communities and their dependence on employment. So the whole region is, over the next few decades, is going through massive shifts in the dominant land use model of the region. And so a lot of my work has been to experiment and develop case studies for regenerative land use models, but also considering how that could be scaled on a regional level. And I think there's many common threads that may be valuable to other regions around the planet. So this is our fynbos, our incredible diversity. And Unfortunately, my image of the forest has failed me, but the fynbos and forest exist in this dynamic dance. The fynbos is reliant on wildfire to activate dormant seed in cycles of anywhere from 5 to 10 years. And the forests have evolved to be incredibly fire resilient because of their diversity in the cooler, moister aspects and biotones. So the fynbos would burn the edges of the forest back, and the forest would creep out over time until the next fire, and they'd be in this dance together. And a lot of the forestry and human disturbed landscapes are right on those margins between forest and fynbos. Okay, I'm going to briefly switch over to a short video giving more context and an overview of what we've been up to at Pachamama over the last 4 years.
Introducing Pachamama Project, non-profit company, situated on the edge of the Neisner Forest, the largest forest complex.
We do not see the video,
home
Chris.
to endemic species such as the Neisner
We see the editor.
dwarf chameleon, and the last remaining forest-dwelling Neisner elephants. This forest is experiencing further degradation and is in need of restoration.
Sorry about that. Okay. I'm going to push play. If you could give me a thumbs up, Andrew, I can see you. If you can hear audio and see visual.
Introducing Pachamama Project's non-profit company.
I think you might need to just switch off share and start share again.
Yes, share the video. Sorry.
Yeah, now try share again with the video.
There we go.
That's looking good.
Introducing Pachamama Project's non-profit company, situated on the edge of the Neisner Forest, the largest forest complex in southern Africa. Home to endemic species such as the Neisner turako, Neisner dwarf chameleon, and the last remaining forest-dwelling Neisner elephants. This forest is experiencing further degradation and is in need of restoration. The deforested and human-disturbed forest edges are now vegetated by dense invasive vegetation, which decreases biodiversity. This, along with large-scale pine plantations, greatly amplifies the risk of catastrophic wildfires. Over 2017 and 2018, the worst wildfires the region has seen in over 100 years burnt more than 120,000 hectares, 1,000 homes, killed 10 people, and countless more animals. You see, invasive vegetation such as wattle, eucalyptus, and pine burn much hotter than adjacent fynbos vegetation, which relies on naturally occurring wildfires to activate dormant seed. In addition, fire also activates the invasive seed bank, which grows back in ever-increasing density. Pachamama Project's NPC is on a mission to seed a regenerative culture through the restoration of both inner and outer landscapes. Since 2019, we have been restoring a degraded forest edge and riparian zone through the management of invasive vegetation and the reforestation of endemic and indigenous species, as well as productive agroforestry systems supporting human needs. We have cleared 20,000 square meters of invasive vegetation, planted 4,500 trees of over 60 different species, with the support of over 120 volunteers. Our ecosystem restoration process starts with the clearing of invasive vegetation, prioritizing critical or high-risk areas. In contrast to the widespread common practice of burning what is thought to be organic waste to reduce the fuel load and fire risk, we process, add value, and reinvest all organic matter, and thus the energy stored within it towards the development of regenerative systems and infrastructure. Materials are either milled into timber, chipped into wood chip, chopped into firewood, or charred for biochar. The timber is used for carpentry and building projects or sold into our local community. The wood chip and biochar feeds into our compost production or is used as mulch to build topsoil, with plans to expand into mushroom cultivation too. The compost feeds into our nursery, producing plants and trees for forest restoration and agroforestry projects. It also feeds into our gardens and agroforestry systems, producing food, medicine, materials, and fibers. So far, we have planted more than 40 varieties of fruit or nut tree. This garden feeds residents, hungry volunteers, course participants, guests, with surplus feeding into our local community. We are a living learning center, sharing the learning this process offers through courses, workshops, and volunteer programs, bringing people together to connect to and learn from nature as well as each other, in so doing researching and developing innovative ecosystem restoration models. We are incubating eco-enterprises and contributing to the growth of a local circular economy. We are an emerging eco-village, prototyping models for holistic community development, remembering our role as keystone species of our ecosystems. Through nurturing symbiotic relationships with both human and non-human allies, we continue to grow a regenerative network, both locally and globally. Integrating and celebrating the arts, music, story, and ritual contributes to our vision of seeding a regenerative culture, as we collectively rewrite the stories of our time while co-creating thriving landscapes and building community. We all have an important part to play. Let's connect, celebrate, regenerate, and co-create places and spaces in which all life can thrive, both now and for generations to come.
Thank you. To just switch it back over to my presentation. So our vision at Pachamama is to feed a regenerative culture through the restoration of both inner and outer landscapes. Our process and methodology is to engage with multiple stakeholders, co-sensing emerging future possibilities, researching and educating ourselves and each other on possible regenerative pathways, prototyping and co-creating demonstration sites, case studies, and then to reflect and iterate. We're also using the Eco-Village design education framework that offers a really fantastic framework on integrating the social, the ecological, the economic, and the worldview or cultural dimension into our So some of the fundamentals of ecosystem restoration that we're focusing on are the flow of solar energy through the ecosystem, the water cycle, nutrient cycle, and population dynamics or succession. So this is our restoration activity up to date. In 2020, in partnership with Green Pop, we cleared this space around here, as well as the edge of the national park on our neighbor's land. And we managed to plant 2,000 trees in 2020, as well as clearing invasive vegetation off the edge of the indigenous forest to allow for natural restoration. And since we have planted a total of 4,500 areas over the 4,500 trees, and as well as establishing our successional agroforestry systems. So using swales on contour to infiltrate water into the ground, Also planting our trees with water catching berms, earth dams to store runoff, and also contributing to fire and drought risk mitigation, and building soil organic matter and the soil water carrying capacity. So if we increase the soil carbon by 1%, it increases the water holding capacity of 1 hectare of land by 14,400 liters. So it plays a massive impact on our resilience to both floods as well as droughts. Our soil health strategies including chipping organic matter to return the energy and back into the ecosystem, chipping and mulching, composting, producing biochar, worm farms, and then working with microbes in compost teas as well as indigenous microorganisms that we're able to harvest from the indigenous forests and cultivate and spray over the restoration sites. And then as well as establishing diverse successional stratified vegetation and the management of pruning, thinning, and cycling biomass. In 2018, we had fires burn through the landscape, which really catalyzed the initiative. Yes, the invasive vegetation, our clearing efforts, our processing, and then our revegetating, planting, and thanks to Green Pop this year, also hosting one of their festivals of action, really integrating the arts and music and celebrating the process. I love the saying, if it's not fun, it's not sustainable. And yeah, we have our first planting site in August 2020, and then 2 years later in September 2022, where you can see not only the emerging trees, forest species that we've been planting, but also the natural regeneration of pioneer species, fynbos species that have completely vegetated and covered open soil. We've also been working on our agroforestry system to supply for the humans' needs within the landscape. And this is something that I feel is really important, is integrating humans and people and humanity as part of the ecosystem, and claiming the potential for humans to play their role as keystone species within those ecosystems. So this was already post some clearing, but you can see still big eucalyptus trees in the site. This is the subsoil that's bare and exposed. A lot of water runoff because this is a clay soil on a slope. And then by November 2020, starting to establish water catchment and planting sites with the abundance of organic matter in wood chip and logs that we were able to harvest through the clearing process. This is a year later, once we planted our second line. So this first line was a year old at this stage. And this is some image from a drone by 2022. So some of these trees within 2 years are standing at 6 meters tall. We're starting to get our first harvest of banana and various other fruit, as well as the production of annual foods in the lines between. Very much inspired by syntropic agroforestry and using the same principles, but I've never formally trained with syntropic agroforestry, so using the term successional agroforestry. We then look at our monitoring and evaluation, and I wanted to bring particular attention to the UN's framework of best practice for monitoring and restoration of ecosystem restoration projects and initiatives, the UN Road to Restoration framework. And I want to draw a link between the outcomes of this framework to the eco-village design that looked at the 4 dimensions of social, ecological, economic, and cultural worldview. So yeah, we have community, food and products, climate, soil, water, energy, biodiversity, and culture. And the reason I bring that up is because when we take a holistic approach to our projects, naturally we have holistic impact along pretty much all of these aspects of healthy and sustainable landscapes. You can see here some of our monitoring data. This is the vegetation structure, and you can see the percentage of open ground declining. You can see the re-emergence of some invasive vegetation, but the rate of indigenous and planted vegetation far exceeding the growth rates of invasive vegetation. And then also the growth rates. This is a graph of the tree heights. So these are just some of the indicators that we are able to get from our monitoring and evaluation, and I must credit Green Pop for their fantastic framework that we have integrated. This is a table of alignment with local and global goals. So starting with the UN Sustainable Development Goals, the Strategic Plan for Forests, the UN Decade of Ecosystem Restoration, the Bonn Challenge, the New York Declaration on Forests, the African Forest Landscape Restoration Initiative, UN Million Trees Program, ecosystem restoration camps. And so there are already a growing amount of global and local policies and initiatives from the top-down layer. However, something that I also want to bring attention to is that often these large pools of funding have a big budgets and want to spend a lot of money in a short amount of time so that they can show that they are using the budget and putting it to work. But however, I feel like that often incentivizes large-scale copy and paste interventions that are not able to really take the contextual nuances into account. For example, the needs of and history of local communities in those landscapes, or the unique biotones and nuances within the ecosystems. Okay. So I'm now going to go into a bit more detail into the research project that I proposed when setting forth into this project at Pachamama. And this is a concept note that at the time I titled the Holistic Organic Matter Management Model. And it's based on the understanding that energy cannot be created nor can it be destroyed. It can only be transformed from one form to another. So ecologically, the ecological energy, the solar energy, the energy gained from water and nutrients in the soil is embedded in the biology and stored as organic matter, which is the sum of all living and once living components in the ecosystem. Economically, there's also an interesting relationship between energy consumption and GDP. In fact, it's a one-to-one relationship. So the more energy a nation or a civilization is consuming, the higher the GDP is. And so those are some interesting threads when we look at how energy is being captured by the ecosystem and distributed, and how we can interact in those ecological flows. So what I'm looking at is a model for transition from the current landscape that we find ourselves in, whatever our context is, to our desired envisioned landscape. And some of the key contributors to that transition may be ecosystem restoration, agroecology, the development of circular regenerative economies and regenerative enterprises, and the development of regenerative communities. However, to develop regenerative communities, we also need to have a regenerative supply chain that can feed the inputs that are needed in that process. And I think ecosystem restoration offers a great opportunity to develop organic regenerative value chains and supply chains. So in our context, this is expressed through the primary process in our ecosystem restoration model of felling invasive vegetation, either chopping it, charring it, or chipping it. producing either logs, firewoods, biochar, or wood chip. Then the inquiry becomes, what can we do with those primary products? What secondary processes can we put them through to optimize both the energy efficiency and the value created from that resource? So, for example, milling it into timber, or inoculating the char to produce biochar, or composting it, or using the wood chip in mycology and mushroom cultivation. And how that could feed into building or carpentry or horticultural or agroecological enterprises, producing infrastructure, plants and trees needed for landscape restoration, and then the basic human needs of food, medicine, materials, fibers, and fuels. So when looking at this value chain development, the inquiry for me became like, what are the key opportunities in this value chain? Because if we can add enough value to the materials and resources that are often otherwise seen as waste materials and often burnt as a means to reduce the fire risk in the landscape, how can we optimize the value created so that we can reinvest that value that's realized back into the primary ecosystem restoration process, that primary ecological service. So not only do we need to develop these value chains, but we also need to do so within the economic models that ensure that this value is reinvested. And I think there's a great opportunity in the decade of ecosystem restoration to leverage carbon credits or ecosystem restoration funding to develop these value chains and the regenerative enterprises that can sustain themselves and continue to scale and replicate regenerative initiatives beyond the scope of just the finance that they received, which is often just project-based. Often it may not be maybe for specific outcomes, and may narrow the ability to really think systemically and holistically. And this is also complemented by some fundamental services, for example, agroecological landscaping or ecosystem restoration services, eco-edu or voluntourism, as well as education. So looking at the economic dimension of the Pachamama project, is we're trying to answer the question, how do we transition from an infinite growth economy towards a post-growth well-being economy? And realizing that that requires systems and infrastructure. And so moving through this phase of a circular regenerative economy is really needed. And I think this value chain development is contributing to that. So some of the things that we're asking is, what do we really value, and what is real value? How is value being created and distributed? How can we incubate regenerative enterprises? How do we create resilient and regenerative local economies? And how do we create opportunities for right livelihoods, means to earn a living from means that are aligned with one's inner values, as well as their vision for the more beautiful world? So in our economic dimension for Pachamama, we really worked with the 8 forms of capital, and not only looking at financial capital, and how do we use these various forms of capital strategically towards our vision. And we also set up an innovative organizational structure. And this is centered around Pachamama Project's nonprofit company. However, that is supported by a private company, a PTY Limited, which is a holding company, a non-trading holding company with a collective of 10 custodians that have put capital in to buy a piece of property. It was an old meditation retreat center in need of restoration, really underutilized. So the Pachamama Project's nonprofit company is the operational entity which manages the land, the projects, and the programs towards realizing the vision to seed a regenerative culture through the restoration of in and outer landscapes. But the capacity of the non-profit company is almost also limited. So partnering with strategic partners that take on particular aspects of the process, for example, Homtini foresters who invested into the sawmill, tractor, chipper, chainsaw, tools and equipment that would be needed, or my own organization, Bioharmonic, who took on the soils, the nursery, the agroforestry, and the forest restoration aspects, as well as other partners that use the space for inner healing work, tying that connection between healing and transformation of the inner landscape and outer restoration expressed through how we interact with our landscapes. And that has been a fruitful process. So over 2019 to 2021, we can see that through thinking holistically, through developing very interconnected micro enterprises, we were able to grow our revenue from 150% within 3 years. And we also saw the value of the land appreciating as we improved the infrastructure, as we restored the landscape, and a total of 47% from 2018 through to 2023. And you can see that not all of the enterprises are necessarily profitable, but they may be playing key functions. For example, the sawmill that's able to process organic matter and chip organic matter is supplemented by, for example, the funding that's received through our ecotourism or accommodation, or the revenue that's generated through our educational offerings and courses. So also thanks to some fantastic volunteers, we were able to develop a very interesting accounting system in which we could not only look at our financial flows and transactions in and out of the nonprofit, we could also facilitate internal transactions between certain aspects. For example, the soils. So when compost moved from the compost project to the nursery or to the agroforestry, we could log that as a transaction and credit the soils and debit. So we got a very granular, detailed expression of the investment in and the yield out of a diverse integrated system, which allows us to make strategic decision making. So 4 years of running this pilot project is really proven to be fruitful. We can see that value is being created, it's being realized, and also because it's facilitated through the nonprofit company, that value is being reinvested back into towards the vision and not paid out to passive shareholders, for example. So we're really trying to use biomimicry and look at how energy is distributed within an ecosystem and apply the same economically in how capital and value is being created and also distributed and strategically invested. So based on that, I feel like there is a promising replicable and scalable models to reach a bi-regional, national, or international level through the holistic management of organic matter and natural resources that become available through the ecosystem restoration process or through the regenerative agricultural systems that are established in the process. So, for example, that value chain may support many micro enterprises or individual initiatives or companies or organizations, but that could be a tool for the establishment of bioregional regenerative cooperatives that are able to play an intermediary role between international networks and grassroots, holistically structured initiatives. The cooperative could play a key function in managing the flow of resources of surplus production, but also needs of the network.
Chris, are you near the end of your presentation?
This is my last slide.
I think so, yes.
This is a great quote by Buckminster Fuller saying that you can never change things by fighting the existing reality. To change something, we need to build a new model that makes the old model obsolete. Thank you all for your time and attention. It's been a great honor to share the work that I've been busy with.
What a wonderful presentation, Chris. You took us from a breathing exercise into a whole new economic model where the planet, nature, and our relationship to it becomes the goal and not someone's personal wealth. Thanks for doing so. And also, I saw in the chat that people are getting excited about your presentation. It is being recorded. It will be published on YouTube. You can always go back to it. All the other Fireside chats will be there also, are there also. But thanks for that presentation. I have tons of questions, but I see there's questions also from others. You can raise your hand with that raise hand thingy in Zoom, or you can post it in the chat, and then I'll find you and have you ask your question. I realize it's already the hour. If you can stick around, please do, because I think we're going to get into details now with Chris. If you can't, don't worry about it. It's being recorded, so you can always come back to it. Questions? Does anyone have a question? Just raise your hand.
Me. Paul Kretter has a question.
Paul Ketterer, yes, go ahead. And then I see Jonathan.
Good evening. I'm deeply impressed. And I would like to get in contact with Chris. I would like to get in contact with you, Peter, as I think I'm the oldest one who is warming his feet this evening on your fire. And I have some, I'm 85 years old. In 60 years, I do exactly what I see, what our youngsters are doing. I know John D. Louis, not in person, but what he has done together with our Australian friend in the Jordan, and so I got the contact through one of our board members. She is called Jane Wegeza, and Jane Wegeza told me that Peter van der Gaag is the director in Holland, and I requested that she is linking me with you because my legacy, which has been presented at the Global Green Week in Tokyo, needs an implementer. With 85 years and as a scientist, you have to know when science is outdated. What I have seen, Chris, I would like to get in contact with you to make a proposal how you could boost your wonderful holistic project with the necessary funds from an international organization, which I must not mention here. I'm myself a farmer, a forester, since the 15th century. It is our family legacy. And what is at stake, my scientific work has been awarded in New York by the United Nations in 2019 with the Pioneer Award, and in 2022 with the burden to save Lake Victoria. These are issues I would like to discuss with people who warm their feet on the same fire as I had the chance this evening. For this, I thank you very much.
Well, welcome to the fire, Paul. I put my email address in the chat. Anyone is invited to contact me at all times, and I'm sure Chris would be open to any conversation also. Really curious to learn more about your legacy and see how we can safeguard it. Jonathan from the mountains, as far as I can see.
Well, I'm not really in the mountains per se,
Okay.
but I'm in a mountainous region. I'm in a lovely little neighborhood, which is a representation of what the city of Weed used to be like, surrounded by old growth forest. But the rest of the area has been, the forests have been extracted years ago with clear cuts. But, you know, I'm hearing this wonderful presentation, thank you so much, from South Africa. And I feel in some ways we're going through a kind of a accelerated cycle of that. We had beaver removal, and then we had gold removal, and then we had timber removal, and now we're having catastrophic fires. This little city that I'm in, this little town, it's not really a city, town, has experienced, you know, 3 fires just this year, one of which took down an entire neighborhood. And so this idea of bio-regional regeneration is really critical to me. And I'm wondering how Ecosystem Restoration Camp could support some technical assistance around partnering with larger NGOs and government agencies in regards to, you know, this bioregional agenda. So that stirs for me, coming from John and also our presenter. Thank you.
I'd like to maybe just
Chris.
give some feedback there. And this is why I feel like the management of organic matter is so critical, because it is the surplus energy embedded in the landscape that is going up in flames, and that energy is being lost, and also that carbon is being lost up into the atmosphere. So I think around the world, the amount of organic matter that's either intentionally burnt or mismanaged and contributing to catastrophic fire risk is something really to pay attention to, particularly in an energy scarce future. So how can we best use that energy and invest that energy and value towards regeneration?
Okay, thanks. Lowell Low. Hi, nice to meet you.
Hi everyone. Thanks. Yeah, I'm a sole proprietor architect in Toronto. I guess this is a little bit. Coming from, I guess it's related to what I do, and I'm curious to know how what kind of shelters are. Are they mostly just people staying in tents, and is it just a short, like weeks? Are you guys planning on more permanent type of cheap housing type? Yeah. Can I ask that? Thanks.
Yeah.
Question for Chris, I assume.
Yeah.
Chris.
Yeah, so the property is quite small. It's 9 hectares. It's got 3 timber houses built on it, as well as 5 very minimalistic cabins around a communal kitchen, yoga hall space. And we do have a tiny house initiative associated as well. So there's some legalities in zoning and permissions that we're navigating and looking at how we can address. But we have, that's our intention, is to build a regenerative community, and that requires housing and infrastructure. So it's quite small scale at the moment, 3 houses and a few cabins, more temporary people moving through, but yeah, I wonder if that answers your question.
Yes, I guess from some of the images, it looked like there were like hundreds of people. Maybe it wasn't from your presentation. I got mixed up.
Yes,
maybe.
so that's been more on an event basis. The volunteer programs, the hundreds of people were at the Green Pop Festival when they came to our site this year we planted 1,500 trees in a day with a big group of festival attendees. So that was, some of that imagery.
It's a small site. Okay, thank you. Thank you.
I think
Yes.
around the world, Lowell, most of the projects are looking for ways to host people. Natural building techniques are being discussed. Tents are currently the currency people use to host. I showed the Habiba camp at the beginning. That's an old beach resort. It has beach lodges that people can stay in. There's a whole variety of things. The Pachaland has a few tiny houses, but most of them are also running into the zoning, planning, permission part of things. I know our first camp in Altiplano couldn't build buildings except if there was already an archaeological foundation in place. So they found an old roundhouse that they rebuilt, but everything else has been placed on tires. So that's temporary building. And some of the locations are around towns and villages where you're actually hosted by people that live there in whatever structures that are there. But in Somalia, for example, Yasmin is looking into natural building concepts to build buildings in that area where no one lives. Anyway, Nick, you had the next question.
Yes. Thank you. Good morning. Can you hear me?
Absolutely.
Wonderful. Great presentation.
Now
I want to come. It looks amazing. I have a question, a comment and a question. The comment is on the holistic organic management framework. I really like how you laid that out. I have a very similar framework I call carbon upcycling, and I would just love to contribute that using invasive wood chips for Johnson Sioux reactor inoculant, you get a shelf-stable, large-scale soil restoration input. I think that's the most potent upcycling of invasive carbon. The question is, I'm very intrigued by the name Pachamama. I've traveled through South America, and I've heard that name a lot in South America, and I'm fascinated by the interplay between global and local restoration efforts. And so I'm just really curious your psychology of why you chose, or why your group chose this very global, I don't want to say brand, but naming, it's a very sacred and important name. And I just would love to hear your story about it.
Sure. So the name comes from the relationship and connection to the founding members to South American traditions, and honoring them as technicians of the forest. And so I think the roots of the project are really in working with plant medicine as a healing modality, and the relationship between, also in South African context, there was a lot of superstition around the forests, and it was never a place where there were permanent inhabitants. There were nomadic movement through the forest and based around so to establish a community right in the periphery of the forest. So there's been a direct cultural exchange and an honoring of the cultural traditions that were at the roots of the project and the founders and the stakeholders, and the intention and the vision that was set through that process. And I think since then it has blossomed and grown and evolved into how that process of working on the inner landscape is embodied and expressed through the way that we relate to the landscapes around us, how we form relationships and connections and networks with the people around us. And so I hope that answers your question.
Wonderful. Plant medicine. I love it. Thank you.
Any other questions to Chris? any comments or ideas that emerged maybe. I mean, we're sitting around a fireplace. It doesn't look like one on if you're looking at a screen, but we're sitting around a fireplace. You can also say silly things. We're not here to punish people for saying silly things. We're at a fireplace, so it's allowed. It's an open conversation. I see no one raising their hands. I also don't see much in the chat. Terrell. You're muted, Terrell. I'll introduce you, Terrell. Terrell is leading the Vic Soleil initiative in the Dordogne in France, also part of the ERC movement. And once he figures out where his mute button is, he's very good with timber and land management. I think you.
All right, I think I got.
There you go.
I don't
Yeah.
know. My screen was messing with me there. Well, Peter and Chris, thank you so much. Your project and your presentation and the level of organization is just really inspiring for us. We're in our second year here in Vert Soleil, and attempting to incorporate many of the aspects of your design model. And I just wanted to say thank you. I think you really helped me just see a really good, more organized way of communicating. You did a great job and it's really great. And I hope we can utilize some of your model. I know you created a template to be used as a template for other projects, and I'd love to be able to integrate some of the work that you've done into what we're doing here. So I just wanted to say thanks and really appreciate what you're doing on many, many levels.
Thank you, Terrell. I'd be very happy to discuss or arrange other calls where we can exchange some ideas or information or take the conversation further. That'd
be great. Yeah, thanks.
I have put an email in the chat that you're welcome to grab, as well as from the website. Yeah.
Good. Nick, you still have your hand raised, or is it a new question?
Oh, sorry. Let me put that down.
That happens more often. John from the Poconos.
Hello. Yeah, I'm in the east woodlands of Pennsylvania. I work for a nonprofit organization here. So you have a nonprofit organization that partners with for-profit under the same umbrella, or?
Sure. So it's a hybrid model. Different. So I like to think of it as an organizational ecosystem, playing different functions with different. So although the main intention is that central vision that's coordinated by the nonprofit too. So it's just been a means to organize different capital input from different stakeholders. Like, for example, if they're buying into the holding company that owns the land, for example, even there, although it's a private company, the intentions have been quite philanthropic. And so we negotiated an agreement that, for example, if somebody sells their share for a higher price than they bought it for, 50% of the surplus is reinvested back into the nonprofit, back towards the collective vision. And also for private, or for example, individual stakeholders to initiate their projects or their, we've tried to create a supportive, through the nonprofit company, a supportive environment to support people playing their part in their own initiatives, which may require their own investment of their time and resources. So to do that within an independent entity that's supported by the nonprofit company, because it's aligned with the nonprofit's vision and plays a key role in that process, helps the nonprofit extend its capacity and also creates an enabling and supportive environment for enterprise development. So I like to think of it as a model for a regenerative enterprise ecosystem, like an incubator type that lowers for example, it lowers the barriers of entry to, for example, for me and my organization Bioharmonic, I don't have to pay rent to hold my nursery because I'm producing trees that are, so that supports me. And if I'm in need of, for example, working capital to make sure that I've got the tree stock available to plant on time, knowing that I'm getting the funding from that, the NPC is able to mediate. And we've got the financial system that we can keep an accurate log of those transactions and the shared investment into different areas of the project. So it's very interconnected, but also with clear independent intentions and initiatives and functions. I wonder if that answers your question, or if you...
Yeah, it's curious because I'm already managing 750 acres with a nonprofit organization.
Right.
How there's a lot of resource here that how can we either generate a new entity that would help the nonprofit. Yeah, so I'm curious how something like that might work.
So for example, the partner that invested into the sawmill, wood chipper, tractor, chainsaw infrastructure, for example, they set that up as an independent, they're playing a key function because they're clearing the invasive vegetation and they're processing the materials. And so the agreement between the NPC and the strategic partner is that 25% of the resource is returned to the nonprofit. So they have a bank of materials and resources to use. And in actuality, it's a lot more than that, because all the wood chip, which is almost seen as a waste product, or the sawdust goes back to the land, which benefits the whole as such. So yeah.
Rather than the nonprofit maintaining all that equipment and manpower, that's exactly the big thing I'm looking at. Do I buy all this forestry equipment to meet the needs of the nonprofit? If there's a separate entity, yeah, okay.
Maybe Chris, I know Andrew has left. He's an Eco-Village elder, and I think they have a meeting. But there is this platform that we've created that's publicly accessible. Maybe if there's a good document that describes your model, Chris, we can publish it there. I'll put the link. It won't be published immediately today because we're end of day for most of us, but probably tomorrow I'll get it on there. If we can publish that document there, then people can access it. I'll put the link to that platform in the chat in a little bit.
Is that the Zendesk platform?
Yeah, it's the Zendesk platform indeed. What I'm realizing is that what you've created, it's very well thought through entities, flows, streams, as an ecosystem functions basically, but on the economic level, if you can call it that, how you interact within the entity with each other, different units, that is actually making it viable and financially sustainable. I think that's the fascinating part that many projects are struggling with. And I think if we can get that model of yours, if you're willing to share it, and I think you are, then we put it on the platform and people can access it in written form and maybe study it even further. And again, the video is online soon, but in written form, you can do it in your own pace and take notes on the side. So we'll do that, Chris, tomorrow morning, our time. So for those on the across the Atlantic, it will be hopefully when you're awake online, and otherwise later in the day. I have Shirley, Jonathan, and Terrell. Shirley.
Oh, excellent research. Thank you so much for that presentation. I would like to know, you've done some really high quality, meaningful, important research. I'd like to know the role, how you build research into it, and education. Is that, an ongoing effort, or how are you able to do this kind of work and and produce the research you are?
I must be honest, I think it's been really just by primarily having the idea and coordinating to put it into action. And it's been a great opportunity for me in this presentation because it's allowed me to really consolidate that that insight gained into a presentable form. So gratitude to the community for facilitating that for me. So I did set out with a clear idea and model that I wanted to test, the holistic organic management model. Education has been in different ways. We've run a fairly consistent, for the last 4 years, it's shifting at the moment, a consistent volunteer program, a 3-week cycle, and there would be a level of knowledge sharing and learning from each other in that process. With different groups, a lot of knowledge exchange. But then we did also facilitate some more particular workshops and courses just on a project-based level. So we've hosted a few permaculture design courses and intro to eco-village design. And I think for me, trying to facilitate that transfer of knowledge from thought leaders and from elders through organizing and coordinating courses and workshops is. But I must be honest, I think it's one of our limiting factors as well. We haven't, just within our organizational capacity, had the means to really get into a consistent rhythm with that. And so one of our limiting factors has been the human succession. For example, the training and education of people that can take on key functions. And then the challenge of working on a relatively tight budget and being able to offer, for example, paid positions. So a lot of the key roles and functions have changed hands, and there's been inconsistency. And although the project at the moment is being held by some people that have been involved through that volunteering and course process and still maintain an active involvement, I think we could improve in that sense, that we're realizing the value of and the need for education and the management of human resource to create resilient organizations and initiatives that aren't dependent on one or two key individuals. So for us, improving the educational and research aspect and then the associated funding so that we can create paid positions for, I think is what our challenge to growing and scaling has been, and what we're needing to solve for.
Okay, Jonathan.
Yeah, I just wanted to respond to something that you said, Peter, and also something that John is pointing to. We are having local challenges based on what are the legal frameworks for being on place. And it's oftentimes, rooted in antiquated paradigms. And so we do have to form kind of a holons of influence where we can talk about things in these really general terms, global terms, that's really helpful to frame the paradigm shift. But on the local level, we need to have very specific legal approaches to either changing local laws and or developing relationships locally that can further the way that we are in relationship to place, to land. And so I think that one of the things Andrew and Leora have been trying to do is reestablish a conversation across the Americas. We used to have a conversation just in California. I think it'd be really, really appropriate for us to be having like land legal discussions about, land management, land ownership, including discussions around the commons, as well as what are the environmental laws that are specific to the United States of America. I'm in a complete holding pattern right now because of what we call NEPA, the National Environmental Policy Act. because the Forest Service is complete hold. So there's not even going to be, any improvement in road access to Hotlam until that goes through. So it's a very specific legal structure which is binding me, and I could benefit a lot from learning what's happening in, the Appalachia, for example, or, in the Poconos or somewhere else in the country. How are they navigating these national laws? But then those counties also have very specific political climates and legal structures. So we need to, kind of work on these different levels. I'd love to have a United States of America call to talk about some of these development issues.
Great. And exactly, your specific regulatory environment is completely different from Chris's regulatory environment or Neeraj's environment in India. So that local conversation, this is why we're forming a community, right? This is why we're sitting around the fireside to have these exchanges. Let me see. It was sent to me over the private chat. I don't know if you wish to do this publicly, but someone is asking Chris, because it sounds like an important contribution to the academic discourse on regenerative models. If you're planning to do this into an actual, if you're planning to turn your model into a scientific paper, which is always a difficult question to ask to a practitioner.
Sure. I would love to, is the short answer. I don't have an undergrad, although there are some programs that I could apply for an adult-based master's program based on the research. I have had some conversations in those lines, and yeah, I would love to. It has been the balance of trying to get things moving in practice and the trade-off between finding the balance of how to do that. But thank you for the encouragement. I would love to grow in that direction.
Great. I see the number of questions drying up a bit. If anyone would like to suggest a comment or just enter the conversation, feel free to do so. And by the way, Jonathan, I'm actually traveling to California at the end of April, so we should try to meet up. I'm going to be in the LA area, but it's relatively closer than Amsterdam is to where you are. Maybe I can come up. Anyone?
Yes, we'd love to have you come. Maybe even if you have to hop a little pedal jumper to come up, or rent a car. It's about 9 hours from driving time from LA. Bring Johnny with you. Bring Johnny with you, and we'll have a party.
We'll try. Yeah.
I have a question.
Anyone? John has opened his microphone. I see.
Someone said he had a question just now.
I think it was Chris.
That is me, John, but after you.
Good. No, go right ahead.
Yeah. So my question is, how do we, and I think what I love about ecosystem restorations camp is that it's really the platform that allows us to have these conversations. But the question that I'm leaning into is, what do your camps on the ground need to do towards growing towards kind of funding opportunities? And how can the grassroots movement also give feedback into the limits and the challenges of the way that finance is distributed? For example, trying to get around the incentivizing of large-scale copy-paste, oversimplified solutions, and how do we grow towards each other from top down and bottom up? Is, I guess, an inquiry, if anyone has any thoughts or insight into that.
There's a gentleman in this call called Mark Kaptein. He's one of the few people with his camera on, who we've just asked to help us figure these types of things out. How can we join up? How can we scale, or scale is a terrible word, but how can we combine all this work into bits that are able to get funding from larger institutions currently putting it into these large scale, I would call almost monoculture type approaches to restoring, just throwing trees into the ground. exactly what we're trying to grapple with as a community as a whole, and everyone in the community is dealing with that. And as you know, and as everyone else knows, it's not easy to align what everyone is doing. We've been around now for 5 years. I don't know if people know that, but ERC has been around for 5 years, and we've been very much focused on growing the community, and now trying to find that alignment is really a big next step to see if we can indeed bring it to the attention of those with larger pockets, in the individual donor or the person living in the area where you're active.
And that is part of the assignment I took on, and I'm still in the process of do my homework, because I want to have my backpack full of experience and knowledge and information which is currently available, and from that we take it step by step with the foundation of making it happen. And eventually, one of the goals is also supply the camps with tools in order which they can use in their specific needs to, let's say, enlarge their funding base. So, Chris, I hope to get back to you in the near future, but I'm still in the, let's say, the learning curve, because honestly speaking, I joined 2 days ago, the movement, movement and the foundation.
And I'll tell you, because I have been trying to do this for a while, every single conversation we have, Chris, tries to pull us out of the complexities you just presented and into that simplistic, what exactly am I funding? What is the exact input, and what will be the exact impact of that one input, and what will be the result? And then I'm interested. It's a continuous struggle that we're having, explaining that you need to move from that easy to understand single tree or carbon or whatever approach into that more complex approach. And it's a bit of a struggle. This is raising a lot of hands, which is great because we're having a fireside chat. But John started to say something when he gave the floor back to Chris with his question. John, maybe you want to put in what you wanted to put in, and then I'll go by all those hands. And Becky, just put it down again, but put it back up. I'm going to give you the floor. John.
I would just say that there are opportunities emerging, and so those people who are interested in this particular question might want to get in touch with me. Here at the World Government Summit, the discussion is about how do we change governments into something which serves the future, because they're quite aware, if you're in a position of responsibility in governance at whatever level, you're pretty stressed at the moment. So you're focusing on multiple crises, including quite serious hot war. So you've got, I wouldn't call them natural disasters, but in some, to some extent they're natural disasters. I guess we're not going to say that plate tectonics is caused exactly by human beings. So these massive earthquakes are potentially exacerbated, but are really, those are natural. But the climate issues, the toxicity issues, these are human-based. But right now, there's a lot of stranded capital, I guess, you could say, from, if you were thinking about this, and that stranded capital is somehow not really real. It's magical. I mean, these people can lose a billion or trillion, and it's like, it's gone. So where was it? What was it exactly? So this is not in the same world that we live in. I mean, they're actually talking a lot about virtual reality and artificial intelligence and this kind of thing. So they're really dislocated from where the majority of people live, and they're not really engaged in this. So one of the things that we can do with the ecosystem restoration camps is bring those people there to the camps, let them experience what it is to live on the earth and to be with people who are struggling and to know them and get to know each other. Because another thing that they're talking about is consciousness and about interbeing and mindfulness and all this stuff. But when they talk about it, it's just talk. And it would be much better to take them camping and let them work in the community garden and be in the central kitchen and eat together and work together and get to know people of different experiences, because they really are isolated in some bizarre abiotic world that they need to overcome. And I think having, like, I hear a lot of people just angry about these strange people, and they are a minority, but they are a very powerful minority because they're in positions of power. And they are also talking about the corruption that comes from money, and the corruption that comes from fame, and the corruption that comes from political power. So they're quite aware that they're being corrupted by these things, but they don't know how to get out of it. It's just the same as if we're trying to do restoration and we don't know how to get access to capital when they have billions and trillions of stranded assets that aren't being used or are not flowing. So I think we have to think about, how do we collaborate? How do we find other people? And how do we understand that we're not individuals, really? We're stronger and we're wiser and we're more authentically true to what it means to be human beings and be a social and symbiotic organisms to collaborate. And so this could help those people who are, and if they make mistakes when they have all this money and all this power, these are very bad mistakes, and it affects very, very many people. And so we kind of need to look at them a little bit with compassion and say, well, this is bizarre. I don't really quite understand it. But the fact is, if you get it right, if those people get it right, then things are going to be a lot better. And if they get it wrong, it's going to be a lot worse. So, we have now the opportunity to invite them to look at the ecosystem restoration camps and communities as living laboratories to actually perfect the things which they're talking about. So they're talking about it, doesn't bring it about. But when they come out to the ecosystem restoration camps and communities and they capitalize and the efforts to make nurseries, seed banks, soil creation, protection of biodiversity, botanical sanctuaries, and they work on ensuring food security in places where there are really hundreds of thousands or millions of people who are facing food insecurity. This is perfect. So now the UN drives up to refugee camps in armored vehicles, and they have radio contact with their security forces, and they're forced to leave so they can get back into their locked compounds before dark. Well, how are they going to understand and deal with the problems that they're facing? They don't even know what's going on. They're so isolated from them. But what we see, for instance, in Somalia is the possibility of creating a prototype in which we can have central kitchens working to help the displaced people and connecting food production directly to food consumption and to food storage. And we can start talking about food security for the entire community, full employment for the whole community. And I think if you have 100% people in those kinds of situations involved in meaningful work, you don't have the kind of insecurity and violence that you have when people are without any resources and no hope, then they're desperate. Now, if they're sitting under the fig tree, holding their child and drinking lemonade and listening to somebody play the lute, they're not likely to want to leave that. So we have a chance to make this happen for all of us and for all of them, and to show the people who are nominally in power. I mean, they think they're in power, but they're really trying to dominate. And what they need to do is to listen to what the people are experiencing and learn what this is and figure out how to act in service to bring about peaceful and productive and sustainable societies. So it's a great opportunity. It's a great challenge, but it's a great opportunity. So that's back to you, Peter, and anybody who needs to contact me, please do.
Jonathan, is it okay, because I've given you the floor a few times, that I first go to Alun and then to La Sonia? I'm assuming it's okay.
Absolutely.
Alun, you had your hand raised.
Oh, yes. I might be a little bit coming from left field here. I'm actually an architect by training and 35 years of experience. And I've actually spent probably the bulk of the last 5 to 10 years working on large-scale projects where you get into land use planning, and it's interesting. You get a large-scale project and you have these conversations at the beginning of the project and throughout the project about sustainability and about the environmental impact of what we're doing. And certainly I've been involved in projects where you do allocate ecosystem or eco zones and forest restoration and that kind of thing, but it just goes into a plan and sits there for a while. And I think it's more like you talked about earlier about talking the talk, but then having to walk the walk. I know sometimes this is about setting up frameworks that allow the top-down approach to work. And what interests me is actually hearing the stories at the grassroots level, really, to know what when you do talk about ecosystem restoration, and we actually know what we're talking about. And certainly my own research and also listening to yourselves today, it's a lot more complex than anyone thinks, and it's not a one size fits all. It's not a copy paste, and I think that's something that's been endemic, certainly in the profession, where on projects we do copy paste from one project to another, and we always get in trouble. And the larger the problem you're trying to deal with, the more risk you run of copy paste. I think it's all about understanding what you're dealing with. I think it's the first time I've managed to attend one of these, and actually it's been an eye opener, and it's great to see the work that's being done on the ground and get a sense for what we're talking about. So yeah, thank you everyone.
Thank you for being here. There's one of these every month, and every month you'll learn about someone who's figured out what their local circumstances allows them to do, so to speak. So indeed, that complexity is always present, which also makes that question about joint fundraising so complex. Sonia.
Yes, my name is Lasagna, and I actually am in the U.S. I am I would call myself a farmer, more of a rancher kind of a thing, and I deal a lot with the underserved community, particularly Black Americans, and more Black Americans right now, because that's what I am. I farmed, I homeschooled, and I currently have property. And the one thing that I don't hear a lot, which I love John Liu, I love Elaine, I don't know, Soil Food Web really got me into everything with the eco restoration. And I have my own property. And the one thing that I see a lot in the US, or just in general, is a lack of bringing the young people to the table. You know, I hear there's a lot of, you know, we're trying to solve a problem, but it's their future that is actually, it's hanging in the winds. And a lot of it is, you know, when it comes to the government and the, you know, these huge companies or huge organizations, USDA, all of that, you know, they only care about the big people. But the thing that we need to focus on is the families, getting the families engaged, bringing it back down to their level, and then focusing on whole systems, like a whole system approach, the way the earth is created and the way she functions. She utilizes every aspect, the land, the animals, you know, the environment, you know, the nature, all of that, and creating whole systems. And that's something that I've worked really hard, you know, with SEER grants and things like that, but funding is a problem. But being able to do prototypes, like they said, of working whole systems that include fish and animals and soil and worms and insects, and then allowing these young people to build this from the ground up, giving them space and place that they, along with their families, can see a zero waste program, to see how every aspect of nature works together in harmony to take care of our waste issues, our sewage issues, take care of our food, having live operational, because the thing is, we can have kitchens and all of that, but the thing is, these people in the undeserved communities are dependent on food banks and somebody to give it to them, instead of, how can I fish? We're teaching people, we're fishing for them, and we're not teaching them how to fish. We're not teaching them how to supply their own needs, how to build their own soil, how to grow their own food, how they can take care of their own waste products without having to have these huge organizations with all these chemicals. Food is medicine. We can grow food. We can grow medicine. Actually, we don't even have to grow it. A lot of it's applied already around us. It's learning using the Native Americans, the knowledge that is had already that is being lost. We need to teach the young people. And if we don't get them to the table and get their families to the table, then we just talking in circles. And that's where the teaching needs to be. It needs to come all the way down. And we can't wait for the government and the policies and all of those things, because they're not going to serve us. They will leave us to die. Nothing personal, but that's the way it is. They'll tell us that you don't need fresh meat. You don't need eggs. You need a can. When we can do aquaponics, we can do these things in our backyard. Having space, that's what we need. I have space. I'm willing to donate my space to teach kids, families, how to build from the ground up. I don't know if anybody's ever heard of Booker T. Washington. Booker T. Washington said, you know what, I can hire all the architects and all the people in the world, but if you don't allow the people to build them for themselves, they don't appreciate it. We have to teach them to build. We have to teach them to grow. George Washington Carver was the lifesaver back in the day when everything was crazy, because he understood the soil, and also because he understood God. We don't have any of this. What we have now are young people that are killing each other instead of this focus. This is important. We need to reconnect them to nature. That's what needs to happen. We need Earth to speak. Sorry.
I think indeed, I think we are all nodding. This is also what many of these initiatives around the world are doing, involving the young in their work. I don't know where exactly you're based, but maybe there's an initiative around you, or indeed open up your own land. But it's an extremely important point, and I see John in the chat agreeing with you. So connect with him to see if you can team up a bit more. I need to also look at the time. It's in my part of the world, 7 o'clock in the evening. I have a 15-year-old begging me to stop so that she can eat. And I'm the cook tonight. So Jonathan, I think what I'm going to do, Becky lowered her hand again. But Jonathan, I'm going to give you the final word of this fireside chat. Then we're going to end, and I invite all of you back. There were 85 people in this one. I invite all of you back next month for another session. Kath, do we know who's on next month? Or am I just putting you on the spot horribly right now? I am. Never mind. Next month, another great project that should inspire. Jonathan, you're getting the very last word.
I just want to thank Lasagna for being here and sharing with us her wisdom. And I just want to give Lasagna the last word. Maybe you can say one word. Thank you, Lasagna.
Food apartheid.
Food apartheid. That's the last word. And I wish you all a very pleasant day, evening, or night. I don't think there were many people from Asia here because it's a bit too late. See you next month in the next conversation.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody.
Oh,
thank you.
Thanks, Chris. Thanks, John, for preparing. Such a terrible host.
Thanks, Chris.
Excellent presentation, Chris, and great to see the progress.
Thank you, Chris. Very inspiring. Thank you.
My email's in the chat, and I'm also about to drop the document with our economic dimension, which has got all the details of that aspect of our project. So if you want to, as well as our social dimension, if I have a minute, I might drop the ecological dimension as well for anyone that wanted more details on that.
And we'll publish it tomorrow on that platform.
Fantastic.
We should be good. Everyone, thanks for being here.